He is vengeance, he is the knight, and he boasts one of the most critically acclaimed video game series around. He's Batman. Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're breaking down the history of the Batman Arkham series. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays and click on the links in the description to vote on upcoming content. During a time when superhero games were mediocre at best and Superman 64 at their worst, none expected a force like the Batman Arkham series to really emerge. Lasting 6 years and spanning 4 main games, Batman Arkham would go down not only as one of the best superhero stories, but one of the best video game franchises of all time. Superheroes have been no stranger to the video game scene. Many developers had received licenses for properties like Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, Superman, and of course, the Dark Knight himself. Since 1986, Batman has starred in a large library of games, and while there were some decent titles, none had truly captured the essence of a Batman experience. Well, that is until spring of 2007. Eidos Interactive had managed to obtain licensing rights to the Batman franchise. After viewing some impressive prototypes from British developer Rocksteady Studios, Eidos had asked what kind of game the studio would do for a Batman game. It didn't take long for Rocksteady to find their approach. This new Batman game would utilize combat that was more cinematic, while incorporating stealth mechanics. This would be a game that would let the player experience being Batman. Impressed with their vision, Eidos would grant Rocksteady the rights to the Batman IP.
Oh, I got something to show you! 1 second, B-Man!
Rocksteady already had an idea of where they would take their players, Arkham Asylum. The idea was to keep Batman trapped with his most notorious enemies. Designs of Arkham Asylum had typically depicted a facility like a mansion or a regular prison. Rocksteady decided to go with an island layout with multiple buildings, taking inspiration from Alcatraz Penitentiary. Each building would also give its own style based on different eras of Gothic architecture. This would help give a sense of history when exploring the asylum.
I know Dr. Young mutated these plants to produce venom.
Yes, and I heard it through the grapevine the evil woman paid the price.
One of the more concerning aspects of the development was the game's aesthetic. It was important to keep the game's dark atmosphere, but Rocksteady knew they couldn't only use a dark color palette, and they still wanted to use some vibrant colors. On top of that, they wanted to make sure that players would never normalize their environment. To avoid these issues, Rocksteady incorporated heavy use of various lighting, allowing reused textures and models to become less obvious, as well as saturating colors to maintain an overall tone.
Oh, you're ruining my big night!
Of course, with a large rogues gallery such as Batman's, choosing which villains to include and which to cut would prove challenging. In the end, Mr. Freeze and the Mad Hatter would be dropped, as Rocksteady had trouble fitting them into the story while keeping the game's dark and gritty tone. Speaking of the story, DC Comics had asked Paul Dini, best known for his work on Batman the Animated Series and for co-creating Harley Quinn, to write an original story for a new Batman game. When Rocksteady had found out that Dini had similar ideas to their game, he joined the project.
One of the great things that Rocksteady brings to it is it's a very English company, so there is a very English sensibility to the design and to the look of Arkham.
The combat system was originally planned to follow a format similar to a rhythm game, where the player would be given specific timed prompts on screen. In an October 2009 interview with Gamasutra's Chris Graft, director Sefton Hill revealed that this was the most challenging feature during development. Weeks were spent tightening controls and making sure that the combat was simple and unique while tailoring to their cinematic approach. On top of that, Rocksteady needed to make sure that combat wasn't too chaotic for players, and that environments were easy to observe. Most importantly, it still had to feel like Batman.
It's not safe, Doctor. The island's a war zone. You won't stand a chance.
Batman Arkham Asylum was announced to the public in August of 2008. While early feedback on the game was fairly positive from gamers, the game wouldn't receive significant coverage as other big titles for the months to come. When reflecting upon this with Gamasutra, Hill addressed the condition of superhero games, stating that superhero games had a tendency to not live up to expectations in the past, so I think there was naturally some skepticism.
He's 8 years old and all alone. Money won't fix that.
Whatever you say, Gordon.
On August 25th, 2009, Batman Arkham Asylum launched in North America on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, receiving critical acclaim for its compelling narrative, unique combat system, and astounding visuals. Many reviewers were calling it the best superhero game ever made, noting its success in how it delivers the Batman experience, from the combat to the Predator missions. Guinness World Records had named it the most critically acclaimed superhero game ever. Within a month after release, Arkham Asylum had sold more than 2.5 million copies, with the PlayStation 3 version selling more than the Xbox 360 version. Arkham Asylum would be nominated for multiple awards, taking home several for game design, story, and writing. With a bright outlook on superhero games in general, fans quickly began asking for a sequel. Unbeknownst to the public, Rocksteady had already begun making plans for a sequel as early as February 2009. However, it was way too early to even be talking about Arkham Asylum 2. Plus, how could they when the public had the announcement right under their noses? Nearly a year after Arkham Asylum's release, Rocksteady came out and revealed the location of a secret room that nobody had yet discovered. Players found an office littered with blueprints and files for a project known as Arkham City. Many key figures would remain for the sequel. Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill would reprise their roles as Batman and the Joker.
Physically kind of twists himself and manifests himself into Joker.
Paul Dini would be part of writing the game's story again, and Sefton Hill would be director. And last but not least, Arkham Asylum composers Nick Arundel and Ron Fish would score the soundtrack for the sequel.
Sorry to disappoint you boys. It's just little old me.
As with many sequels, the goal was to be bigger than Arkham Asylum. It was time for Batman to venture out onto the streets of Gotham, sort of. More villains, more gadgets, more locations, a bigger world. Of course, Rocksteady would also have to address and attempt to fix the issues that Arkham Asylum had. The most glaring issue was within the game's detective mode. The mechanic hadn't caused technical issues, but it did create some experience issues. Many players had ended up going through Arkham Asylum while completely in detective mode for most of their adventure. This caused the aesthetic and visuals to be kind of overshadowed, or, not seen.
I see what you're doing, Bat. What is it? Too scared to face me?
One feature requested by fans was access to the Batmobile, too. In an interview with The Guardian, Rocksteady's marketing game manager, Dax Ginn, stated, "It ain't a driving game. Also, lots of the streets in Arkham City are filled with rubble and craters. It wouldn't make for very fun driving even if we did put the Batmobile in the game." He went on to add that putting the Batmobile in the game would make for a completely different gaming experience. More on that later. Batman Arkham City was revealed on August 5th, 2010. Scheduled to release in fall of 2011, the next year would see a lengthy marketing campaign costing over $10 million. In order to appeal to all gamers, the marketing team determined they needed to sell Batman not as a superhero, but as an action hero. The team came up with a series of black and white images that captured the dark tone of the game, making Batman seem more like the gritty heroes typically found in action games. Along with a slew of creative and diverse trailers, the hype for Arkham City was in full effect.
Twinkle, twinkle, little bat. Watch me kill your favorite cat.
On October 18th, 2011, Batman Arkham City had launched, and it received universal praise for its improvements in combat, graphics, animation, and overall experience. Critics and fans found Arkham City to be significantly better than its predecessor, citing how it not only fixed issues from the first game, but improved and fleshed out more features than were already great. On top of all that, Arkham City had taken the title of most critically acclaimed superhero game ever from Arkham Asylum. Arkham City would go on to be nominated for and win multiple awards for its writing, voice acting, music, and character design.
Even after everything you've done, I would have saved you.
While Arkham City continued to receive overwhelming praise, it suffered from some technical dilemmas with a small percentage of its player base. For Xbox 360 players, save files were mysteriously erased. PC users, on the other hand, were having trouble using a newer version of DirectX, and were told they would have to use an older version until the game was optimized. This would not be the last of the series' troubles on PC.
I'm not finished just yet.
Unlike the secret room in Arkham Asylum, it didn't take long for fans to discover the Arkham City secret room. A small boat outside of the steel mill can be opened by using the cryptographic sequencer. Using the code City of Terror, players found cargo holding dozens of insects and a very disturbed thug. What could this possibly mean in regards to the next Arkham game? Why is Scarecrow ordering dozens of insects for research purposes? Unfortunately, these questions would not be answered for quite some time, as the Arkham series was about to go into a completely different direction. Rocksteady knew that their next Arkham game had to be much bigger than its predecessor, but that would also take a long time to complete. To fill in the large gap between Arkham City and its proper sequel, WB Montreal was brought onto the Arkham series to develop a new spin-off entry. The studio had already worked on the Wii U port of Batman Arkham City, which had allowed them to become familiar with the inner workings of the game. Knowing the massive success and reputation Rocksteady had, WB Montreal was aware that they had to live up to the already very high expectations. As director Eric Holmes stated, "We are standing on the shoulders of giants."
So it seemed like there was a lot of enthusiasm for me for this project, and when I found out what the opportunity was, I jumped right on it.
Throughout the development of this new Arkham game, Rocksteady would consult WB Montreal on the tech, but the story was entirely their own. WB Montreal had chosen to focus on a story where the Dark Knight was much younger and still trying to figure out how to be Batman. The game would shed light on Batman's relationship with different characters before his fame, such as Jim Gordon before he became commissioner. This would allow WB Montreal to portray a Batman that was more exposed and vulnerable. As one would expect from a studio change, Batman Arkham Origins would be developed by an entirely different set of faces. Opting for a younger Batman and Joker, Roger Craig Smith and Troy Baker would replace Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill respectively. The music for Arkham Origins would be composed by Christopher Drake, and the story was written by Corey May, Ryan Galetta, and Duma Wenjant. To explain his absence in this new project, Paul Dini stated that he had not been contacted for future projects since Arkham City's initial launch, and that he would be busy until 2013.
You might learn something about yourself.
You need to learn to shut up.
Batman Arkham Origins released on October 25th, 2013. Unfortunately, it was not as openly welcomed by fans and critics as its predecessors were. The game was criticized for its overly simplistic puzzles, a world that was too empty and linear for its massive size, and an unnecessary and lackluster multiplayer mode, a messy plot, and a buffet of bugs and glitches. Frequent lagging, corrupting save files, missing continue buttons on the main menu were just a few of the most severe problems. Sales weren't nearly as impressive as Arkham City, even failing to surpass Arkham Asylum's numbers. Origins was kinda leaving a bad taste in gamers' mouths, and WB Montreal didn't help in February 2014. The studio announced that no further updates would be released as they were busy working on upcoming DLC. You can safely assume that players did not take kindly to that. After the disappointment that was Arkham Origins, fans were eager to see Rocksteady make a return to form. The studio had been toiling away at a new installment since the release of Arkham City, planning to develop this as the series finale. The final chapter in the Arkham franchise would see the return of Sefton Hill as the game's director, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill as Batman and Joker, and Nick Arundel composing the music, but not with Ron Fish, with David Buckley taking Fish's spot. Another major change was in the writing team. Paul Dini was once again not brought on to work on this new project. Instead, Rocksteady formed their own team of writers to form the story.
Make the most of your opportunities. Use them to give back to a city that has given us so much.
Not only would this be the last game in the Arkham franchise, but it would be the first to jump onto next-gen consoles. With the technical capabilities of the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and modern PCs, Rocksteady would be able to put more characters on screen at once, render models with more polygons, and of course expand the scope of the game's world. This was to be the ultimate Batman experience.
Oracle knew she couldn't escape, but she caused this crash for a reason. She must have left a clue while crawling away.
The most notable addition to the last Arkham game was the inclusion of the Batmobile. Just as Rocksteady had told its fans in the past, development for the Batmobile would be no easy task. The studio was kinda wary about how often the Batmobile should and shouldn't be used. Concerns rose over players potentially using it too much or too little. This would not be the last time Rocksteady would hear of these issues, as critics and fans expressed these same concerns after the reveal of Batman Arkham Knight in March of 2014.
Enemy spotted! Drone's been hit!
Batman Arkham Knight released worldwide on June 23, 2015 for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. Even though the scores still weren't as strong as Arkham City, critics felt that Arkham Knight was a thrilling conclusion to the series, commending its narrative, gameplay, and design. That is not to say that the game didn't come without its criticisms. Fans and critics were divided over the utilization of the Batmobile, with the main gripe being that it was too powerful and kind of a tank that didn't feel very Batman-y. Regardless, Arkham Knight became the fastest-selling game in the franchise and the fastest-selling game of 2015.
Are you okay?
Perfect. What little girl doesn't dream of being bait for her strapping Dark Knight?
Although, for PC gamers, this would be the most disastrous entry in the Arkham franchise to date. Arkham Knight's PC version saw abysmal reviews for a laundry list of technical issues. The game was plagued with performance issues, frequent frame rate stutters, and low-resolution textures. Many pointed fingers to Iron Galaxy Studios, who had worked on optimizing the game for PC. Others blamed Warner Brothers themselves for knowing that the game was a mess and shipping it out anyway. The publisher tried to make amends with consumers, offering refunds to PC players while continuing to release numerous patches. Even though the Batman Arkham series had a somewhat troubling life in the last half of its run, the franchise has made an important mark on the gaming industry. In a time where superhero games were no different or better than their movie tie-in games, Batman Arkham showed that the superhero genre can be amazing when they're done right. While borrowing other ideas from games like Metroid and The Legend of Zelda, the Arkham series proved it can stand on its own, not just as a fantastic Batman story, but as a marvelous game series. It wasn't just a series that superhero games needed, but it was a franchise that superhero games deserved.
Thank you, Bruce, for everything. Goodbye, Jim.
Thanks for watching Mojo Plays. Be sure to subscribe and click on the link in the description below to check out our suggestion page and vote on what content you'd like to see us cover next.